Welcome to the Marine Biologist podcast. Join us to discover the latest ocean topics from leading marine scientists and conservationists. The podcast accompanies the Marine Biologist, the magazine for members of the Marine Biological Association, and is presented by the editor, Guy Baker. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Today we're going to be talking about marine conservation and the power that communities can bring to protecting special areas of the sea. We're delighted to welcome Dr Bryce Stewart, Senior Research Fellow at the MBA and Associate Professor at the University of Plymouth, who wrote in the Marine Biologist magazine about the marine protected areas around the Isle Arran on the west coast of Scotland. Hello Bryce, welcome to the Marine Biologist podcast.
Hi Guy, yeah, thanks very much. Great to be here.
Good. So let's launch straight into some questions. What three things should we know about you?
Wow. Okay. Some three interesting things. So when I was young, I wanted to be a professional holiday man, according to my dad, but he told me to be a marine biologist instead, which is not quite the same thing. But just occasionally as a marine biologist, I feel like I'm on holiday in some nice tropical place, snorkeling or on the beach. Another thing, I guess, which is a bit unusual, I grew up in Papua New Guinea, and I still have a pretty good handle on the language there, Tok Pisin. So, Mipala igad gudpala savi long olgeta something belong solwara, which basically means I know a lot about what's in the ocean. So I'm a marine biologist. And then I guess the other thing is I'm well known for my sort of interest in scallops and my work on scallops. But if I had to choose, I'd say probably my biggest, the biggest thing I'm a fan of is cricket. Actually, I'm a huge cricket fan, so I have been. I'm not very good. I tried to be a good cricket player, but I wasn't. But yes, my interest in marine biology and in cricket sort of compete with each other a little bit.
That's great, a good rounded character. You've given us some clues, but tell us how you became involved in marine science and what your research area is.
Yeah, so I guess those things that I've told you about, apart from the cricket, are related. So, yeah, I grew up originally when I was young in Australia, and like most Aussies, we spent a lot of time on beach holidays, and then we moved to Papua New Guinea when I was 8 years old, and I was there until I was 17. And I think that really sealed the deal because where we lived, there were coral reefs nearby. So from 8 years old, I was snorkeling on these amazing coral reefs. And then, I learned to scuba dive when I was a little bit older than that. I also have always loved going fishing as well, and I think that's part of it. So that interest in both what's under the water, but also interest in fishing at the same time has kind of shaped the way my career's developed. So I studied an undergraduate degree back in Australia at the University of Melbourne, just in zoology. I worked for a couple of years for the Victorian Government Fisheries Department. And then I did my PhD up in Queensland at James Cook University on the Great Barrier Reef. And really from there, this joint interest in fish populations, fish communities, how they work, the need for conservation, but also this interest in fishing and recognizing it as a very important food source, but also part of history and culture, led my research to sort of really focus on how do we balance those two things? How do we supply seafood to the world's population and maintain fishing communities while also looking after the marine environment?
Your article in the Marine Biologist magazine is about the Isle of Arran and showing that marine conservation begins at home. Can you bring us up to speed on why Arran has become a focus for marine conservation?
Yes, it's quite a long and interesting story, but I'll try and sort of just give you the highlights. So the Isle of Arran on the west coast of Scotland is in the Firth of Clyde, which naturally is an extremely productive marine area and once supported some of the most productive fisheries in the whole of Europe. But because of a combination of sort of changes in legislation and poor management, those fisheries really started to decline, particularly in the latter part of last century. And one of the things that happened along the way was that the inshore area from sort of the coast to 3 miles off, in the 1980s, that was opened up to trawling, bottom trawling. And until then, it had still been relatively healthy. But two local scuba divers, Howard Wood and Don McNeish, saw this, in front of their eyes. They saw the change that this created. They saw the loss of biodiversity on the seabed. They saw the decline in fish populations. And they weren't marine biologists or scientists. Howard ran a garden centre. Don's an engineer, but they were very concerned about this change in their local environment. So in the early 90s, following a holiday in New Zealand that Don had been on, where he'd heard about these things called marine reserves, came back and said to his mate Howard, we need one of these on the Isle of Arran. We need to have an area that's protected from fishing to see how it can recover. And then fast forward 13 years, which is what it took for that to actually happen. They finally got the Lamlash Bay no-take zone. It's a very small area. It's only about 2.8 square kilometres, but it's no fishing, and it was the first one of these in Arran, in Scotland, sorry, and it's still the only one. And what was really key to making that happen was engaging the local community. So Howard and Don formed what's now known as COAST, the Community of Arran Seabed Trust, which is made up of a load of members from Arran and some from further afield who support this idea of looking after your marine environment. And from that early stage, it's really gone from strength to strength. So they originally got that no-take zone in 2008. And then on the back of the sort of really quite rapid recovery of that in the first few years, and some changes in UK legislation, they were then able to campaign for a much bigger marine protected area around the south of the island, the South Arran MPA. Now, that's not a no-take zone. It allows some low-impact fishing. But again, all of these measures, these different types of approaches to sort of conserving and managing the marine environment and the engagement of the local community have kind of made it famous, to be honest. So maybe some examples of that is that Howard, who was one of the founders, won the Goldman Environmental Prize back about 10 years ago, which not many people may have heard of, but it's considered to be the biggest prize in the world for grassroots conservation. So he was invited to America, went on a big tour, was set to meet the President Obama at the time. Unfortunately, he got called out on some urgent business, but he still went. He went to the White House, and not long after that, Howard was also awarded an OBE. So. It's become this focus, this example of what you can do at a small scale if you have support from the local people.
Yeah, we protect areas of the sea so that nature has a chance to regenerate. And as we saw in David Attenborough's new film, Ocean, the seabed is particularly important. Why is this?
Yeah, so the seabed plays a lot of different roles, I guess. I mean, one of the key things to know is that anything that goes into the ocean, pretty much anything, it sinks and it ends up on the seabed. So that's where a lot of the nutrients, but also, unfortunately, increasingly things like litter end up. But in terms of the seabed for ecosystem function, yes, it recycles nutrients, but it stores away carbon as well, as we hear in the film. But I guess probably most significantly for marine life in the ocean is that it supports this incredible array of biodiversity. So lots of species live in and on the seabed, but a lot of those species actually create habitat. So we can think about things like seagrass or kelp or obviously coral reefs as well. And they grow on the seabed, and then they provide this three-dimensional structure which acts sometimes as food, but also as shelter, particularly for small, fish and shellfish and other species like that. So a healthy seabed is actually really important for biodiversity in general. And my connection to what's happened on Arran in particular is that I was lucky enough to meet Howard and Don 20 years ago. We had a workshop at the time in 2003 that was designed to bring together everyone in the UK who worked on marine protected areas at that time. And there were 19 of us. That was it. I think if you did that workshop again now, there'd be over 1,000 for sure. But it was early days then. And through that initial meeting, I supported their campaign for this Lamlash Bay no-take zone with the science when I could. But then also soon after it was designated, Howard said to me, no one's really monitoring what's going on, what's recovering. And so we started off on a small scale. One of my master's students at the time, Lee Howarth, went up and did the very first sort of detailed surveys on the seafloor of the Lamlash Bay no-take zone and then of the areas around it to look at how recovery was happening. And like I say, it was already, even after 18 months, the area was recovering. And then since then, we've just expanded that monitoring program. So I've had, I think over 20 different students and other people involved in the 15 years since then. And we've really expanded our methods as well. So it's predominantly based on doing scuba diving surveys of the seabed, but we've got more sophisticated. So we started to take, high resolution images, both stills and videos. We've used sonar. We've started to use crab and lobster pots to monitor what's going on with those species. We've used baited underwater video cameras, and there's even been a little bit of eDNA work done as well.
That's great. And I'm looking at the image in the article you wrote in the magazine. It was that beautiful seabed, alive with bryozoans and sea squirts and scallops and that big pink sun starfish. Do you know if that was an area that was previously dredged?
Yeah, it was actually. So pretty much all of both the no-take zone and the marine protected area were dredged. Not the areas just right in close to the shore, obviously, but the vast majority, it was all open to dredging. There was no restriction on it. So the only restrictions were just based on the depth and the habitat. And I guess, fishermen do generally only dredge where they think they'll catch scallops. But yeah, that area was dredged. And this is something that we'd really seen over time is this incredible recovery of the seabed in the absence of these sort of bottom-towed fishing gears. So we actually have, wasn't done by me, by my team, but before the area, the Lamlash Bay no-take zone was created, there was some side-scan sonar imaging done. And it genuinely does look like a ploughed field. So you can see, dozens of tracks across it in this big area. And so it really was in a pretty poor state at that point. And so now to see how it's recovered is quite remarkable. But what's also interesting is we're just starting to get a better idea of how ecosystems function naturally. So some things have gone up pretty steadily. So the king scallops in particular, there's a lot of variability on the seabed. Some places have lots, some not so much. But in general, the numbers have gone up. But other things come and go, and understanding the dynamics of a relatively natural and healthy ecosystem is really important for understanding how ecosystems work, and therefore understanding better about how to conserve and manage them.
Yeah, you make that point really well about how things vary over time and from season to season. And David Attenborough in the film Ocean was at pains to say that conservation wasn't to the exclusion of fishing, and fishing and conservation should be the two things that can thrive side by side. And how did you work with fishermen around the MPA and the MPAs around Arran?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think we've been able to do that both on Arran and where I used to previously work on the Isle of Man, is we actually engaged the local fishing community. We talked to them about their views, but I think most importantly, we worked directly with them. So we chartered their boats to do the survey work, to do the scientific work. And that just sort of changes the platform, I think, because you work alongside each other, you get to know each other, you have a lot of time to have conversations, and to try and better understand each other's perspectives. And what you tend to see is that, a sort of bit of give and take on both sides. It just naturally evolves, but also a bit of respect. And so, on the Isle of the Isle of Man, where I worked before, we did that with scallop dredgers, and they voluntarily started to create protected areas. It's not always that easy. Not everybody's a fan. But what happened on Arran was we have this no-take zone, which is very small, right? I mean, it doesn't really affect the local fisheries very much. But we have strong evidence that there's spillover, like you see in the ocean film, both from animals. We know lobsters are moving in and out of it. We tag them. We know this is happening for sure. We know there's high levels of breeding, particularly of lobsters and scallops, and that those larvae, those young individuals, are spreading out around the surrounding area. But what also was done on Arran was to create spaces for different types of fishing to exist. So most of the South Arran Marine Protected Area is open to fishing, more than 95% of it. But it's open predominantly to low impact fishing. So this is either diving for scallops, which is something that's actually taken off in the area over the past few years. And crab and lobster fishermen still, again, are allowed to operate pretty much as they were. There's, on the very edges of this area, there's a little bit of prawn trawling allowed with, certain restrictions. There's no scallop dredging allowed anywhere in that area because that was considered to be incompatible with the habitat. But yeah, the vast majority of the area is still open to fishing and open to a lot of different types of fishing as well. And so if you go there, particularly in summer, you'll see quite a few fishing boats. And what's really great is to know that's going on, but to be monitoring the area and to see that it's becoming healthier and healthier over the same time period. So you've actually seen what's in the ocean film. You've seen fisheries improving and the marine environment improving because of this more nuanced approach to management.
Do you find that fishermen have knowledge that you can use in your science?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, that's fundamental. And I find that in a lot of the science that I do. On Arran, it was really crucial, particularly when we were working out how to monitor the lobster population, because lobsters have very specific habitat requirements, right? They don't just occur anywhere. They need kind of rocky substrate on the seabed. They like to be in crevices and in little holes and things like that. And so when we were setting up the monitoring program for that, we worked just directly with the local fishermen to say, where did you used to fish when this area was open? And so, it turns out that was actually only about 10% of the area. And so that's where we did the surveys. And we, as an exercise, we tried fishing in other random places. Oh, we caught nothing, right? So this guy knew what was going on. He'd been fishing there for 20 plus years. And so that was really fundamental. But I think the great thing about working with fishermen is, often they have a long-term perspective on how things have changed. This is a separate project I'm working on down here in the Southwest on pollock. And, we're interviewed fishermen with over 40 years of experience. So they can tell you about how things have changed over that long period of time. And also they're at sea, like, most fishermen are at sea sort of probably 200 days a year or something like that. And so they're seeing the unusual things. They'll say to you, oh, yes, well, we saw an unusual amount of sunfish this year, or, oh, we're catching like lots of John Dory now. We never used to catch any at all, or whatever it is. So having those eyes on the ocean is super important, particularly now for understanding the effects of climate change.
Yeah. And you talked about monitoring, but how do you communicate about whether an MPA, Marine Protected Area, is working?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because a lot of people just assume it's about the biology. And I am a marine biologist, and that's been my predominant focus. So you go in there, you monitor things through these methods, like I've said, through diving, through videos. etc. And you see how the biodiversity is changing, and you compare that to areas that are unprotected, because you need to have those controls as well. And that's super important, because that's the basis of what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve these more biologically healthy ecosystems. But then it's also important to know, what else is the MPA doing? So how is it affecting the local community? And on Arran, we've done some studies on this. And, one of the things that I found really encouraging was the amount of pride that there is in the local community about the fact that they've protected their local marine environment, that that they're known all over the world, to be honest, for doing this as a great case study, even more so now after the ocean film. But also, and they genuinely say that it brings tourists to the island, now there's Coast has a visitor centre, for example, and there's a lot of information up around the place. And so that kind of leads you on to another element, which is the economic benefits of it. So in this case, if it's benefiting tourism, then that's great. But also it's created jobs in marine conservation. It's created, there's a diving business that's set up now, and wildlife watching tours and things like this. So monitoring those different elements are all really important. And so I think what you want is a well-rounded sort of package of success for a really, really good marine protected area. I think the only other thing I'll add is, and I'm a bit biased because I'm a scientist, but as I said, I've had over 20 students over the years go up and do field work on the Isle of Arran, and often it's been for either their master's projects or their PhDs. And I know for a fact that they've all had a brilliant time. I mean, they all come and tell me how fantastic it was to work there, how motivational it was to work with a community that was so engaged in marine conservation. And pretty much all of those students now have gone on to have their own careers and sometimes been very successful and very influential. But they will point back to that experience on Arran as being quite sort of fundamental to the development of their careers. So you get this like human capital benefit as well. And I don't think that's as well documented as some of the other things.
Does the Lamlash Bay no-take zone and South Arran Marine Protected Area, do they show that fishing and conservation are compatible?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, most of those, the no-take zone is no fishing, but that's a very small part. It's like 1% of the whole area. But the rest of it is open to fishing. So, it does allow these low-impact fishing methods to still continue. Crab and lobster potting. They've actually tried as well potting for scallops using the scallop lights or scallop disco method. And then things like diving for scallops as well. And so, absolutely. Like it's a fantastic example of this zonal approach. As long as the method that you're using is compatible with the things you're trying to protect, then that's going to be a way forward. But we've also seen, like spillover of lobsters out of the no-take zone. And we also know that these really healthy populations of certain things like scallops and lobsters are breeding at exceptionally high levels in the protected areas. And so very hard to prove that that's actually benefiting fisheries. But we have seen in the area a general improvement. For example, the lobster catch rates have gone up, over the last decade. And so there's a lot of good evidence that it is providing a big range of benefits to fisheries as well as conservation.
And in Arran, it seemed like a clear-cut case of stopping the destruction of seabed habitats. How can communities be involved in other places where they maybe don't know what's happening underwater?
Yeah, so that's another great question. And I would point to the Coastal Communities Network as a great example of how that can happen. So the Coastal Communities Network is, as the name suggests, a network of about 25 organisations now, I think, around Scotland, who were inspired by the story of what happened on Arran. It turned out there were a lot of other little groups around Scotland. Originally, it was only maybe half a dozen. And some of these groups were tiny, like they were, two people who met when they were walking their dog, and they said, oh, look, there's this pollution in our bay, like what can we do about it? And they'd set up a tiny little organization. And that has really grown from there. And so, as I said, now there's 25 other coastal community sort of organizations around Scotland. They don't all do what's happening on Arran Coast. They have their own specific sort of issues that they're dealing with. Some of them are, protesting against salmon farms that they think are in the wrong place. Sometimes it's marine litter. Sometimes it's conflicts between different types of fishing. I go to their meetings every couple of years, and it's so inspirational to be part of them because I've seen them grow over the last decade. And like I say, now a number of those organizations have set up their own science programs, and some of them focus a lot on science communication and outreach. So they've got their own little remotely controlled underwater vehicles, or ROVs, that they'll sort of fly down to the seabed and, make some really cool footage. But others have actually worked directly with the Scottish government to help with surveys, again, because they have that local knowledge. And some of the others have made films, for example. So it's absolutely possible. It takes commitment and perseverance. But, I think as the title of the article in the MBA magazine is called Marine Conservation Begins at Home. And I think for me, that's a really powerful message. Like, yes, you can sign petitions to say, let's change this across the world or whatever. But don't forget also just to look after your own backyard. That's where you can probably, as an individual or as a small group of people, really make the biggest difference.
It is inspirational. Bryce, we might have a clue about this one, but can you tell us what your favourite sea creature is and why?
So, I do get asked this question occasionally, and everyone assumes it's a scallop, and they are definitely right up there. But I think my favourite creature is a blue marlin. And this is inspired by seeing a few of them when I was growing up in Papua New Guinea from the boat. And then, obviously as documentaries have sort of come on board, I always remember seeing them in Blue Planet 1 and 2, feeding in high definition. I just think they're the most magnificent creatures. They're pretty weird, right? Fish with a great big spike on its nose. But I just find them just fantastic, like beautiful, magnificent. They can swim incredible distances. I feel like they kind of lord it over the ocean. Apart from humans, they don't have any other sort of threats, anything else to worry about. So, yeah, I think a blue marlin would have to top my list.
And what advice would you have for a young person who wants to be a marine biologist?
Wow. Okay. So I think, first of all, I'm going to say follow your dream. That's certainly what I did. And to begin with, I wasn't the world's greatest student, but I was just so determined that I was going to make this work. And I'm lucky enough that I have. So don't give up. If that's what you want to do, if that's your passion, follow your dream. Just keep at it. I would also say identify your special skill, your strengths. Because being a marine biologist is many things. I think some people think it's just about scuba diving and teaching dolphins how to speak or something like this, right? But and certainly there are positions for field-based marine biologists, but you can also do a lot working in the lab. One of the things now that's really developing as a method is environmental DNA, or eDNA, where we can take a water droplet and find out what species have been in that water. You might, for example, be really good with computers. And so actually those numerical skills are super important, and modeling what's going on in the marine environment is absolutely vital. Or you might be more creative. You might be a great writer, or you might be, somebody who likes to take images or make films or whatever. Even social media, this is super important for communicating some of the issues that the world's oceans face. And so you can be a whole range of different things if, depending on your skill, and still benefit marine biology and marine conservation. And then I guess my final third thing would just be perseverance, because it's not an easy thing to succeed in. And you're going to have some ups and downs. And there's probably times when you're going to feel like quitting and doing something a bit easier. But, if that's your passion, if that's your dream, then just don't give up, keep going. And I promise you will have some fantastic rewards. Like, yes, sometimes I have to try and balance spreadsheets and I spend a lot of time answering emails. But other times I'm swimming with blue sharks, or, watching fin whales next to the boat, or even going to the premiere of Oceans with David Attenborough last week. I mean, who ever expected that would happen? So, persevere, follow your dreams, and identify your special skills.
Great, thank you. Well, it's great to speak to you, Bryce. It's inspirational work, and it really reinforces this message that given a chance and with local effort as well, the marine environment will bounce back really quickly. So, once again, thanks very much. And we look forward to following your work in the future.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Become a member of the Marine Biological Association and be part of a global community advocating for the ocean. You'll receive 4 copies a year of our beautifully produced magazine, The Marine Biologist, and a host of other benefits. We have a special offer on. You can save 25% on MBA membership using the code OCEAN25. This offer is valid from the 7th to the 31st of May 2025 and is for monthly payments only. We hope you enjoyed this edition of the podcast. If you want to learn more, then join the Marine Biological Association and be part of our global membership community. Simply visit www.mba.ac.uk and discover a membership category that suits you.